Hey everyone, welcome everyone. Let's give it a little bit for some folks to join. As people are joining, please go in the chat and take a couple minutes and let us know where you're calling in from. Very excited about our panel today. So once again, as we're waiting for the rest of the registrants to join, please let us know where you're joining us from in the chat as we just take a couple more minutes. I still see a bunch of folks coming in. Got a bunch of people saying where they're coming from. I'm seeing Boston. I'm seeing Minneapolis. I'm seeing Portland, Ithaca, New York. Nice. I'm in Woodstock, San Diego, Springfield, Bryan, Texas, Los Angeles, Northern Utah, Vancouver. We got folks from all over. It's very exciting. Also, what's very exciting is we have an outstanding group of panelists from 4 leading engineering and construction firms. Let's give it a couple, 30 more seconds to let some more folks join. And we'll kick things off. A lot of folks, a lot of engagement in the chat. So we're 2 minutes in. Let's get things started. Once again, have an outstanding group of panelists from 4 leading engineering and construction firms who will share how AEC marketing can gain a strategic voice in their organizations. So let's get started. So what's our roadmap for today? We'll share why this topic matters, then hear from our panelists, and then take your questions at the end. And feel free to post questions at any time. Just use that little Q&A box. We'll address them at the end. Before we start, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Derek Ries, CMO at OpenAsset, and I'll be your moderator for today. My passion is helping AEC marketers streamline their workflows and improve their ROI. And I'm thrilled to be part of today's session and really learn alongside all of you. First, I want to take a quick look at the current state of AEC marketing and explain why it's so crucial to address what's not working and what's working in 2025. So recently, OpenAsset surveyed over 900 AEC marketers globally to understand their challenges. Our mission was to empower you with the right tools and insights by understanding your pain points, everything from resource constraints to limited strategic influence, and helping you solve them. As I'm sure many of you already know, we compiled our findings into 2 reports. If you haven't already, be sure to download and share them. The more we spread the word, the closer we get to driving real change. But ultimately, we learned a lot. We learned that marketers are stretched thin. Like this is a sort of moment. Like almost 75% of their time goes towards business development support. And then add brand strategy, add events, digital campaigns, all those different things on top of that. And the workload becomes absolutely overwhelming. Nearly half of all marketing teams have less than 5 members, making resource constraints and operational efficiency their biggest hurdles. And our goal here as OpenAsset, and as this panel too, is really to help you do more with less. An unavoidable reality. We're all sort of faced with it. So let's just make sure we're really strategic about it. On top of that, only 1 in 4 marketers can hit their targets with current resources. That's why we're doubling down on solutions that free up your time for high impact work. We all know that marketers spend a significant amount of time on proposals, yet only half align with their ideal customer profile, to me, which is insane. And 64% are submitted on the deadline day. This really underscores a critical need for efficiency. And that's why we're here to help you shift from being reactive to proactive. So ultimately, AEC marketers deserve better recognition, deserve better tools, greater strategic influence. And today's panel is part of our commitment to making that happen. And we hope that you leave feeling empowered. So enough of me talking. Let's meet our panelists. Tanya, could you please share your role, where you're based, how long you've been in AEC, and how you got started in the industry.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Derek. My name is Tanya Kennedy Flood, and I am based in Canada. I joined RJC Engineers, a North American consulting engineering firm, 17 years ago. Like every time I say that, I'm still a little shocked myself. I had completed degrees in marketing and finance and certifications in international business and had worked for a software company in marketing prior to joining RJC. When I met with the managing partner of the firm at the time, and learned more about the AEC industry and RJC as a firm, I knew that it was a challenge that I really wanted to take on. I couldn't believe how different marketing is in the AEC space. And that's something that I continue to learn about and see the changes that happen within our industry that are different from where it is outside marketing in other places. There's a real blur between marketing and sales and business development. Since then, I continue to learn more about the nuances of marketing within AEC, and I now lead RJC's marketing communications team across North America.
Awesome. Thanks, Tanya. Very excited to have you part of this panel. Let's move from left to right. Emma, do you want to let us know a little bit about you?
Yeah. Hi, everyone, especially those calling in from Texas. We are a commercial general contractor based in Dallas, Texas, and we only build in the great state of Texas. But our saying is, we're big enough to compete with the big players, although we are only Texas based. So happy to be here. This topic is a really hot topic. It's personal to me. Hopefully my title, I'm not a title person, but I think it's reflective, a little bit of the passion and the topic today. I'm currently in a strategy and marketing role, which is a new role for our company and likely the industry. I've been with RO for going on 9 years, in the industry for almost 15. I love the question, how did I fall into AEC? I think 90% of this call is probably still wondering how we got here. But everything happens for a reason. And for me, my whole career has been in marketing on the GC side. That all happened through internships in college, but I knew I wanted to be at a company and in an industry that was able to take the creative side of what I enjoy and kind of, mix that with business and be able to see results. So that's exactly what we do as marketers in AEC, and no day is the same, which is also, I think, a big part of why I enjoy my role in the industry, and I have no plans to leave it. So happy that you guys put this panel together. And again, this topic is I think a really important one, and one that I think is being spotlighted a lot more. So hopefully the conversation is able to kind of share some nuggets that everyone on the call is able to take back with them and share with leadership, or if you are a leader, kind of learn something different too. So thank you guys for organizing this.
Definitely, and thank you, Emma, for being here. And I love how you said no day is the same. I mean, that's the truth, no matter where you are. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. Adria.
Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Adria Klein. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. I don't know if I saw Alabama come up on the map, but welcome to all. With Robins Morton, we're a general contractor that is focused around the Southeast area. So we have over 10 divisions in several different states across the Southeast. And I've been here for about maybe close to 8 years now, and primarily focused on the data side of the marketing support and what all is entailed with that. So just really getting the fundamentals down before we get into the big game. Glad to be here.
Fundamentals before we get into the big game. Yes. Nick, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, so Nick Menniss, I'm based in London. I'm not sure if I saw anything pop up in the chat of anyone based in the UK, but hello. I work for Mace. We're a global construction consultancy company. We do work in the Americas, but we also work in the Middle East and UK, Europe, and Asia Pacific as well. My role is Associate Creative Director. I focus predominantly on content creation. I look after a team of creatives. So anything from video, photography, motion graphics, graphic design, anything you kind of think of in that space. And how I got into the AEC, as others have said, I'm not really sure how I ended up in the AEC industry. I started in TV and film. My degree in education, higher education, was all in kind of media creation and television and film industry. worked in the industry for a few years, 5 to 6 years, and somehow transitioned into the corporate world, and I've ended up in Mace, and I've been there for almost 10 years and been in the industry for about 13 years. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. We have a super tenured crew here. Very excited about that. A bunch of folks who've really, empowered themselves and really sort of moved up the ranks. So I'm really excited to learn from this. So let's kick off the first one. First question: what does empowering the AEC marketer mean to you? Emma, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, love to. I think a little bit of my intro is connecting, strategy to what we do. And strategy is such a big word. So really being able to kind of define what that means for you and your organization. But I think times are changing. Marketing is not just proposal generation. While that is super valuable and will never go away, there's so much more to what we do. And I think there's a realization that us as marketers, we often say, we're unicorns. And another way of looking at it is, we're a Swiss Army knife. We can do a lot of things and we can do them really well. So I think being able to kind of make that connection and correlation to leadership and to a company and how that impacts, not only culture, but business. And, we just mentioned ROI and being able to connect, why we have a team, the size that we do, and educating kind of what we do and why we do it. And all of that results into company success and growth and aligning goals to what's important to leadership. So I think my advice to the group here is advocate to have that strategic input. And there's different approaches and ways. It's just offering to help as a starting point with different initiatives that might not fall under marketing. That can open the door. While I also know that allows you to say yes to a lot, and it's a workload thing. There's a way to go about it that I think has a really good return for you personally and professionally, and for the company.
That's perfect. And I think that really dovetails nicely into something that Tanya has mentioned in one of the pre-calls. So Tanya, you've talked about leadership culture being key. What's your take here?
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that Emma said Swiss Army knife. That's such a great description of what we do. And talking about leadership culture, like empowering the AEC marketer, like that is a cultural thing. That is a leadership part. That means equipping your marketers, your team, with the tools and the knowledge and ultimately the authority to be able to do their job, to strategically position their firm, allow them to amplify the voice of the firm and its brand, and to drive meaningful client engagement. It's really about recognizing the role of the AEC marketer as that bridge between the technical expertise and market needs, and providing them with the autonomy to craft those compelling narratives that they need to be able to do, to leverage data for decision making, and to allow them to foster strong collaborations and relationships with the technical teams and with industry as a whole, so that they can help you win work and build relationships. So it's really about giving AEC marketers the confidence and the influence to shape how their firm is perceived. And it's becoming increasingly important. I believe Emma just mentioned that, right? The AEC space is becoming more competitive and it's becoming more sophisticated. And to rise up to that, you need to empower your AEC marketers.
Couldn't agree more. Adria, what are your thoughts?
First thought is without data, you're just another person with an opinion, right? And so again, looking at what we know and then what we don't know. And that's where we've really just come into the tackling of what it means to empower our group, is understanding that flow, that natural data tracking, the brand consistency, how much proposal load are we taking on, which divisions need help, when and where, and what that looks like. And really just understanding that if everyone gets on board, then you get a chance to explore what we're best at, and not being told how to do it, but basically, again, strategizing what is the best approach. What does that data mean to us? What does it mean to our clients? Are we consistent? Are we using those tools like our CRMs and our content libraries to help support it? And that just goes into the long-term health of the company. And that's where, if everyone is empowered there with that knowledge, then they'll be able to continue to support that growth.
Absolutely. Nick, let's move on to you. I know you've built a creative team from scratch. How does empowerment look for you?
Yeah, personally, I think it's so important to give people the freedom to be creative. I think it can be difficult in probably many organizations, maybe not even specifically the AEC industry, to feel confined by what we do as an industry and the things we build, and feel limited in the options we have from a creative aspect. It's also, and we'll touch on this later on, around having the creative freedom to do what you think is important, to represent the brand, to build that brand reputation, which often sometimes the key decision makers in that process. So, whether it's run by a board or it's a public facing company or whatever it might be, to bring them on the journey, to convince them that you need to be creative in certain ways or new ways to push the brand in certain directions. So I think to kind of wrap up that question, it's about empowering creative thinking within a marketing department to enable a safe space for that thinking to happen, and to really nurture it and push it along as far as you can. And yeah, I think that's kind of what I do in my job, and that's what the team do as well.
Thank you, Nick. That was a great way to close this one out. Appreciate it. And thank you everyone for your thoughts on this. Let's move on to the next question. So let's talk about how marketing's just evolved drastically over the years. Adria, let's start with you. What does the marketing function look like at your organization, and how has it changed since you joined?
Again, what Emma said about just the strategy, having a more formal structure and really thinking about that strategic initiative instead of each division doing it their own way, or reinventing the wheel over and over. We really started focusing on what we needed to do to streamline that process and creating those data standards, having our CRM as the single source of truth across the board, from top down, having that leadership buy-in, working on those brand guidelines, our policy and procedures, what those standards again look like, document the processes across the board, and get all with that same look and feel throughout all of the divisions, as well as what those standards may be across the board. So one of the things that I would like to say with this is to think about the three things that you could think about. Formalize your processes, build the trust in your data with consistency and integrity, and align your team's roles to the bigger picture. And when everybody's on the same page and you have those same goals and strategies in place, then you can measure that success with those tangibles.
I love that. Establishing a source of truth and really just aligning everyone. I actually jotted down: formalize your processes, build trust in your data, align your team's role to the bigger picture. So thank you for that. Emma, I know your team's grown a lot recently. How has that changed your marketing scope?
Yeah, I think that actually answers one of the questions in the chat too, of, every firm size is different. And I think that's something to keep in mind when you attend discussions like these. But hopefully there's still some takeaways that you can, apply. But for us at RO, I think our story is interesting. Just to paint a little picture, pre-COVID, and even a little bit before. So call it 7 years ago, we were a firm size of, 300 employees, doing about 500 million in revenue with 3 marketers. COVID was a lot of, crazy time for everyone, but for us, since we only build in Texas, we kind of had this unintentional growth. And we had major burnout, and that was a really kind of a good eye opener, not only for marketing, but, other teams at RO, but for us as a team, we grew a little bit going into COVID, but we used that as an opportunity to really kind of hit the pause button, and, do an internal audit. I think leveraging resources like SMPS and even OpenAsset, the visual that Derek shared at the beginning that shows the roles and responsibilities and everything we touch. Using tools like that is a really great way to educate leadership in a really visual and quick way. I always say, our CFO doesn't need to know exactly what we do, but they need to know enough to know the impact that we can bring. And so going through kind of an internal audit, leveraging these things can really help make a case, and provide data to to be clear on, what it is that we need and what we are asking for. So you fast forward, we kind of went through that process internally. We, presented all that data and aligned with leadership and kind of made it clear of what we're asking for and what we need and why. Our team right now is a team of 14. There's a lot of moving parts within that too, and we can talk about more of this in some of the future questions as well. But I think overall, going through that kind of journey of, we have some pain points and here's how we need to get out of it and here's what we need from you as leadership, really kind of puts it all on paper and makes the ask clear and shows the value. So now we're hitting 1.2 in revenue as a company, 1.2 billion in revenue, and we have 550 people. So we've grown a lot as a company, and we needed the marketing team needs to grow with that. So I think being clear on, what it is that helps tell that story and the why, and again, benchmarking, what are competitors doing? We've touched on that a little bit, but that's a powerful tool. And what are client expectations like now? So there's a lot to unpack there. And I think in the next question too, I can get a little specific of, what that looked like for us at RO and how we got the support and buy-in from leadership to grow to the size we are now. But I'll close with this. If you're at a firm where leadership doesn't see the value after you go through these steps, I think it's important to kind of ask yourself if it's a good fit. Because that's the reality of our industry too. Not every firm is kind of growing with the trends. I'm not encouraging everyone to jump ship and find a new company, but I do think that's a realistic struggle that some of our peers in the industry deal with. So I think having these tools to have these conversations is a really great first step.
Definitely. And I think one other thing too is just having enough confidence to talk to different folks on the executive leadership team. So for instance, CFO might be really intimidating, but on the weekends, she's a soccer mom, hanging out with her kids. I think that's something we spoke about before.
It is. Yeah, I think speaking the language of different leaders is important. The CFO is a great example. And for us that we can unpack later is how can we be a part of revising our go-no-go process that directly impacts profit, right? Speak their language. And I think it's intimidating because it's not all marketers are good with numbers. I'm not. But, you build those relationships with other leaders and you build these internal advocates. And that's a huge part of what we're talking about today.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Emma. Let's move on to Tanya. Tanya, how's your firm's marketing matured over time?
Mm-hmm. I think the maturity of our firm in marketing is really reflective of the industry as a whole. When I began in the AEC industry and even at our firm, marketing was really an ancillary task. It was something that was handled by individuals whose primary roles and responsibilities really lay elsewhere. So that could range from having someone at your front desk doing marketing to having your managing partner, one of your most senior people, doing it as well. So now I think that's changed. When I interviewed for this role, the managing partner asked me point blank, why would I hire you? Why would I hire a marketing professional? And my answer then is the same as it is today, is I can do it better. I live this. I'm a professional in this. I understand this and I know this. So those who do marketing really well, they have that knowledge, they have the skill, and they have the experience to be successful in their chosen markets. In our industry, I've seen a dramatic shift, and in our firm as well, of how marketing is approached. The need for marketing professionals is just increasingly becoming more evident, and leading firms are recruiting individuals with that specialized expertise and knowledge and marketing qualifications. It's a shift that's ushered in a whole new era of sophistication and marketing efforts across the AEC space to align with really the industry's broader embracement of business innovation. And to Emma's point, the firms that aren't catching on to that, don't stay there. That's not where you're going to grow unless they're willing. I think marketers in AEC used to purely be tactical, and now they're contributing to executive decisions. I saw in the chat, one of the questions was, a question around like what budgets firms typically allocate to marketing, and that's changing. I would say, like, in answering that question, it's somewhere between 3 and 10%, and it depends on whether you're a small to medium firm or a large firm. Small to medium tend to spend a little bit more based to against their revenue because they're trying to grow that brand recognition. But if you're in a firm that has really big growth ambitions, they better be investing in marketing.
Definitely. Yeah, I think there's sort of a common theme. It's just really moving from reactive to strategic is what a lot of the folks on this panel seen before, fueled by leadership buy-in, structured processes. I think that's sort of key. So thank you so much. We got a follow-up question for number 2. Tanya, let's keep this conversation going. Can you share some concrete examples of how you've built credibility and demonstrated ROI for marketing within your organization?
Yeah, and some of my fellow panelists have really spoken really well to this, especially like Adria. Like for us, like data and information, that's really what serves as the cornerstone for informed decision making and for building credibility. Like we analyze metrics to guide our choices in sponsorships, social media, RFP responses, resource allocation. You have to have regular reporting, including like summaries of what are your KPIs and how are you performing against them, to really show the transparency and accountability. Those reports, they don't just track progress, but they also highlight areas for improvement, right? And they show that marketing strategies are effective and efficient and support business goals. So, through that, you can really actually measure what that return on investment is from marketing. It allows us to make evidence-based adjustments too, right? To optimize what those efforts are and to demonstrate the value that marketing is bringing to a firm. I mentioned this before, that the evolution of marketing, it really reflects that broader industry trend towards having more strategic value in how folks go to market. So marketers can have an even greater impact whenever they're using, data-driven decision making. So I would advise you to look at what data you can capture to inform your decisions and to show the impact of your efforts. Look at what you can do to move the needle of improvement for your firm, and that way you show and demonstrate and bring value.
Yeah, definitely. Using data absolutely shifts mindsets, and that's sort of key. And being able to back up into ROI or revenue numbers is it speaks to leadership. It works all the time. I even find myself doing it all the time. It's key across whatever industry you're in. And with that, like, you obviously need to sort of display it in some different way. And Emma, I know you've built some strong dashboards. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I mentioned earlier kind of that journey we went on during COVID, and we were, major burnout. We were also chasing a lot of work. We weren't saying no to anything, which again, COVID was wild, and I get that. But it was really eye-opening for us as we kind of, were able to come up for air. And what it did for us is we were able to take, our data in our CRM tool and leverage, Power BI to start connecting all these different data sets. And we ended up creating what we called a data map. Again, all lived within Power BI, but it was able to kind of take all these moving parts and visually summarize like where we were at as a company and how that impacted marketing, pre-con, BD, like everyone was drowning. So that was kind of the real reason we started to create that. And we had a great team that helped build that. But I say that was really eye-opening. It kind of showed that we had a really major, breakdown in our process and our filter process specifically. And so marketing was a big leader in acknowledging that, right? Building this dashboard to tell that story, but then also a part of the solution. We need to refine that. And so I would zoom in, and even like the go, no go process for your firm, marketing should be a really big part of that. I know that's a struggle that we all face of, are we in those conversations consistently? We should be, but not all, it doesn't happen all the time. But even a little, a step further into that is the process working well for your firm? If it's not, how can you help drive change in that? And that was a really big opportunity for us. And like I said, marketing was a big driver in that. And it's not perfect, but we now have a really robust 2-part go no go process that marketing was a big part of in creating. And that results in a lot of positive things for a company. We're chasing better work, hopefully being able to manage resource capacity a little bit better, because that's part of the evaluation is do we have capacity to put the proposal together? Does pre-con have the capacity? The obvious one is, which it's easy to miss, is do we have people available to build it? And all of that's weighted, right? So it sounds like a simple process, but I would encourage everyone on the call, if you're not already involved in the process itself, or it needs to be revamped, go ahead and try to lead that. Put a committee together, but marketing can and should be a big part of that. And I think the dashboard really helped inform that process refinement for us, and we're seeing really great return on that.
Definitely. Like we constantly hear how there's, firms who absolutely do not have any go, no go process. It's basically just go after everything. But it's so important to know what's your ICP, what's your ideal customer profile, use that data to back it up, and use that data to basically say, this is where we win and this is why we win. Let's spend our time on stuff where we can win, where we have big win rates, things like that. So that's perfect. That's great advice. Adria, I know you're very focused on data processes. How do you really leverage data and process to reinforce marketing's sort of worth or value within your org?
First thing that comes to mind is do something with what you have. And when we take that mindset, it's not just all in, nothing out. It's about looking at what you have and where is it coming from? What's the life cycle of that data? And then what is that output and what is meaningful about that output? One thing that we really spent time focusing on over the last 5 years is just really being proactive and knowing what that timing was for our data, having the latest, the greatest, making sure that everything was consistent. But there was times where maybe a report ran and that data was outdated because they just had a meeting and had all the updates in. And so recognizing what that data workflow looked like and what that process was gave us a better idea of that timing, so that when we were running those certain reports as to what other strategic meetings were happening with our operations and with our leadership, so that we could use that information to go forward off of, was also key in our steps of that workflow and that processes. So we started really with that data mapping, looking at what our data components were, what that workflow system looked like, and then what that cycle was around that data, so that we could see, again, what those inputs and those needs were and what the expected outputs, then desired outputs would be. One of the areas that we really took the time to focus in with OpenAsset was just getting that buy-in from other departments. We used our safety department to start managing our content from the digital standpoint of the safety images, be a part of that approval process, and then map that back over to our marketing administration, so that we could then use those approved images along the way, so that we're not asking and backtracking for images when we need them for proposals. And so having that buy-in again from other departments was key. So I definitely recommend, and not just housing everything internally, but making sure that you're branching back out to those other departments too, and having that initial buy-in all across that flow of those data systems. And then lastly, just bringing in integration, looking at ways that you can integrate your systems that you have in-house and some external components there too. Also with the CRM, one of the things that we really started mapping out again was our data warehousing, making sure that we were pulling from the same bucket internally, and then mapping our accounting system with the financial data connector and our CRM, and other integrations across the board too with mail systems and so forth. So just looking at ways to cut back on that repetitive processes of those tasks that are being repeated manually, whether that is an individual or several resources, streamlining those processes, document it, and again, revisiting that life cycle of that data over and over. It's always changing, and systems are changing as well. There's always opportunity.
I love that. It's kind of like just the idea of source of truth, getting buy-in across different teams, and then making sure that data is piping to the right places. And then everyone's sort of speaking the same sort of language, which is great. leveraging the same.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Nick, this is really interesting for me just because I have less experience here, but how do you show creative or brand ROI?
Do you want the short answer or the long answer? I'm just looking over time. Or somewhere in the middle.
Give me an answer.
So it's interesting because we're not directly involved in work winning kind of processes at Mace as a marketing department. We were years ago, and that got divided out. Most of our work is really just external and internal facing brand reputation stuff. And also kind of building our presence within strategic areas or whatever it is that we decide that year is the direction of travel to go in. For us, and especially in my world where we create, visual content, it's really hard to gather metrics on the success of that content. The question that often gets thrown around by our senior leaders is, so what? If I go out and make a film and that film gets shared with 1,000 or 10,000 people, you don't really know whether any of those people are a key influential decision makers that perhaps companies are trying to target. What we did to really change that was bring in some really good tools, some good MarTech tools to do some great customer journey tracking. We analyze kind of key people, what they do on our website, how they interact with our content, and we target them with very specific content that kind of brings them on the journey. So, it might be that we want to move further into a certain type of industry, pharmaceuticals or data centers or whatever it might be, and we want to further position ourselves in there. We kind of analyze who our key audiences are, and there could be anywhere between 1 to 20 people, right? And we sort of build profiles around them, and then build specific content that's tailor-made for them, really. So if the video only gets 10 views, we know those 10 people are, the people we actually really want to focus on because they might be involved in the process of opening up a conversation or having an introduction meeting with someone in our business. Perhaps it's a new customer that we haven't targeted before, and we've seen actual results from that as well. It's been a game changer, and that has in part been part of our journey as a department, from growing from a team of 19 when I joined to a team of 50 is part of that, showing actually if you can use the right tools in the right way, you can do a lot with very little. You can really target people that you really need to convert something into, an introduction conversation, or, helps position you further ahead of a bid or something along those lines. So, although we don't get, direct feedback on how good a particular piece of content is, we kind of get that through how they interact with the content, and then what happens to that person once they've seen that content or interacted with whatever we've made. So it's quite an interesting place to be. It's really powerful, and it means we're not just kind of throwing things into the wind and just seeing where it lands. We're making things with purpose. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. It's kind of like thinking about all the different touch points throughout the user journey, with different technologies, and really just seeing what's working there. That's very insightful. Thanks for that. Thanks for that between short and long answer.
I felt it was long, but sorry.
Well, that was great. I think very informative for me, at least. And just a reminder to the attendees, just please make sure that you're adding questions to the Q&A just so we can get to them a little bit later. With that said, let's move on to question number 3. So obviously we just covered data. Data is just one piece of the puzzle. Puzzle. Leadership buy-in is another. Nick, let's go back to you. So what steps did you take to gain leadership support, and how did that shift your ability to contribute more strategically?
Yeah. So again, I could be slightly wrong with this, but I feel like video content is something that everyone wants, but it's a nice to have, right? I imagine throwing money behind using an external production company or whatever it is that your company does. It's hard to find that money to do it. I was on that journey when I joined Mace 9 years ago. There wasn't anyone looking after video content. We're now a team of 4. I'm sure we'll touch on this a bit later in more detail, but the biggest challenge was really is how do we use video content strategically, when at that point in time the perception of video content is just kind of fluffy content that doesn't, again, really serve a purpose, as I was touching on a minute ago. How I went on that journey was to be consistent. So it's all about the small wins and taking one step at a time. It sounds obvious, it really does, but is convincing them through actual tangible outputs. Yes, you do the high glossy stuff that, they want to see, and arguably maybe has less of an impact, but it has a bang to it. But it's about doing those small foundational kind of steps in content creation. Okay, so again, storytelling and just being consistent with how you deliver that stuff, and slowly building up a kind of really good arsenal of content that they suddenly see the value in it. And that's kind of the journey that we went on. So it's about consistency, it's about delivering on time, it's about being trusted, it's about being responsible for your space as well. All those things led to them taking us more seriously, rather than being, again, a nice to have. That actually were quite a serious asset in the marketing kind of arsenal. So I guess to summarize that, it would be, obviously getting face time with the key decision makers, but demonstrating your value consistently, not kind of doing extremes at either end, just delivering on what you're there to deliver on, but slowly building momentum behind it, slowly upscaling your offer, and demonstrating value that way. So that's kind of how we've kind of gone on that journey at Mace.
It's all about, establishing that trust, building on that trust, and even like internal marketing, I think is a consistent thing too. You have to constantly remind people.
Yep.
But often the work does it itself too, which is great. Tanya, I know you've mentioned educating leadership early on. Can you share your approach to this?
Yeah, and I saw that too as a question, was like, how do we even get people to adhere to deadlines, et cetera? And gaining leadership support is really critical to have them understand what it is you do, right? Yeah, I really believe that getting that support for marketing, it's having, when you start, like, it's having that willingness to learn, bringing thorough preparation, and as you and Nick just mentioned too, to establishing that trust. So when you enter like the AEC space as a marketer, you can't educate leaders until you actually understand your firm and your industry and your market. So you need to build relationships. You need to build relationships within your organization to learn about what it is you do and what is it that is your service offering. And you need to build relationships within industry, with your clients. Like, what is it that they need from your firm? What are their challenges? What is it that you solve for them? And with your marketing peers too, so that you can learn from them and benchmark from them. And then I think it's establishing that credibility, coming to every meeting prepared. Like, at the very base level, you can always attend a meeting prepared. And when you come doing something even as simple as having actually read the RFP, that makes you valuable, right? That shows your professionalism, your commitment, and allows you to contribute to that conversation and even lead that conversation. And then establishing trust, as you both mentioned, right? You need to have that trust. You need to deliver consistent results and maintain open communication, respect each other's expertise. Like, marketing isn't a solo endeavor. Like, it's a team sport, especially in this space. And you have to have those three things in place so that you can then become that trusted advisor for your leadership team and for your colleagues, right? Once you have that, then you can start that education piece so that folks understand what it is you do, what you need from them, and how they position themselves best. So to address that question about how you get people to adhere to deadlines, which is a challenge, I think it's like saying, hey, this is part of our credibility. This is part of our product, right? This is the first step in showing the kind of service that we deliver. And if we're going to be rushing this response at the very end, we're not going to be adhering to our standard of quality.
Yeah, standard of quality. It's kind of like you constantly, I think it's important as a leader to constantly remind your team, like, listen, this is credibility that we've established. We have to keep it up. Like, we have to continue pushing it forward. And also, I love that point that you had before where it's like, you just join the meeting or just make sure you read the brief beforehand. I think often there's a lot of people, especially earlier in their career, I was probably definitely guilty of this, where it's kind of just like, you've done like so much to sort of get to this one spot. And then like the last sort of step, you just you don't necessarily hit it. Maybe it's, you know, get the chance to get around to it, a little bit lazy, whatever the case might be, might not think it's super important. But it's like, if you're getting, you know, 95% of the way there, that last 5% is critical just to really well round out everything.
Yeah, it's like Nick said, it sounds so simple and sounds so obvious, but it can often be that misstepped. So yeah, in summary, I would advise people, you know, to learn, to be prepared, and to have integrity.
That's perfect. Thank you for that. And Emma, do you want to sort of close us out on this question? Like, how do you tailor the message for different leaders?
Yeah, to hit on leadership support, I'll share. It's a little funny, but it's reality of the RFP. You have a kickoff meeting, and maybe whoever's leading the pursuit didn't read the RFP. I know we all can relate to that. And a year or two ago, our leadership team said, well, if that happens, cancel the meeting. Talk about support and buy-in. And I mean, I know that that's dramatic and it's hard to do, but it's things like that. That's a win for what we do and what we advocate for, right? Because it's the reality. We're wasting our time if we're not all on the same page. We're not all invested. But again, such a relatable everyday challenge. I think for me, it's echoing some of what we've already talked about, but it's so important is being able to speak the language of other leaders too, and tying in emotional intelligence to some of this is huge. And again, it's obvious, but how you have a conversation with the CFO will probably be different than with the HR team, and being able to kind of switch your approach is really key in what we do. And it kind of goes back to that Swiss Army knife, right? You're going to have a different approach with different leaders. And I think that for me, that's what keeps things exciting. It's hard to pivot sometimes, but I think you have to. And I think in these relationships that you're building, which can be intimidating, we always use the CFO example, but it's the reality. Our CFO is great, and he's a person just like we are. And I think approaching it that way is helpful, and it's reminding yourself of that and giving yourself the confidence. But going into it with clarity on, you want to understand what's important to him or her. How can you help? But at the same time, what you're doing is you're also getting that clarity, and they're helping you. And in these conversations, in these meetings, while you're building these relationships, you're also indirectly educating them. To Tanya's point, right? Like that journey will never end for us as we take on more, and as our industry evolves. That's going to be a constant, I don't want to say battle, it's an opportunity for us to always educate. But in these meetings and conversations, you're doing just that. For HR, we are a massive partner with them. Show our value. How do we improve internal comms, which directly improves employee engagement and drives culture? There's a quote where culture will eat strategy for breakfast. You can have all the things we're talking about, but if you're not at a firm that has a culture that can, promote everything we're talking about, then it's all for nothing. So I think that's important. But at the same time, how does marketing tie into all this? You can't have marketing without strategy, and strategy without marketing. So I think that's a really good summary is, how can you put all this on paper, and how can you connect these dots? And just find ways to tie in, marketing with business goals. And that strategy piece is in both. And I think everyone will be surprised if you kind of put it on paper and just approach it kind of big picture, and again, connect those dots. I think you do that, and you're helping the firm, you're helping other leaders, and you're also helping yourself and your team. Everyone's kind of getting that clarity to hopefully move in the same positive direction, and you're gonna have a seat at that table. Sometimes, maybe too often, right? And that's, I think, we can talk about in a future question. There's a balance with all this, but I think connecting these dots is key.
Yeah, I think marketers definitely fill the gaps more often than other teams. Maybe I'm a little biased there, being a CMO, but I love that that quote that I believe is the Peter Drucker quote. Culture will eat strategy for breakfast. Like, spot on. Peter Drucker's always spot on. And also, you need to know your audience both externally, like we need to know who we're selling to, we need to know who our customers are, but also you need to know your internal customers. You need to know the people that you're selling to, and you need to know what keeps your head of HR up at night, your CFO up at night, and really cater your messaging to them and your points to them, and like, this is the so what based on what you care about, I think is sort of key there, right? Cool. Awesome. Great question. Let's move on to question number 4. So every success story has its hurdles. What challenges have you faced in empowering yourself or your team, and how did you overcome them? I think this is a perfect one for Coach A to kick off. Adria, would you like to share some insights on this one?
Absolutely. When it comes to team, that is definitely my heart and soul that I come to work with every day. And we couldn't do it without being a team. One of my loves and passion is baseball and softball. I'm a softball fanatic forever. Coached it, played it, and love it, and will live it forever. And I see that strategy even amongst our team here. They hear some kind of reference to it at least once a week. But we do tackle everything with that mindset that we all have a certain role for the bigger picture, and that's to go for the win, to do our best and make things happen. But I may not be the best first baseman for our team. And so that was one of the challenges that we looked at. We looked at who had the most talent and the most initiative and drive and interest in some of the areas instead of everyone trying to be a first baseman. So we took that mindset and started streamlining some of those processes. And that's where one of the roles that I'm currently in as in asset management was that we needed to put that focus in managing the data side of things, understanding what all is a part of our data integrity and making sure that our resources weren't spread too thin. And so even though that is by nature going to go hand in hand with marketing as a whole, though, we started looking at how can we, again, look at who would better suit certain components of that. And that has really helped us with consistency, production, less rework, and instead of everyone being kind of that jack of all trades. We have our graphics, we have our assets, we have our content and our specialists, in all of those arenas. So we really just looked at tackling the gaps and identifying them through the strategic planning that we talked about, setting those goals, forming committees, and then the commitment to the finish line to make sure that each one of those were being addressed along the way. And there was no quick or long-term into it. It was just setting those goals and making sure that we got through those effectively and efficiently so that we could make sure that those resources and that were being utilized. That gave us a better outcome, again, for more accuracy, less rework, and overall better proposals. So that was the big win for the team. So really just taking that time to look at your team members, look at the needs, look at those values that are within your group, and you'll get a better overall outcome.
That's perfect. And I think you said this really well. You said, go for the wins and do our best. And I think that's really all about. Nick, I know you've done a lot here. I know you've faced a lot of challenges. I can't imagine what the challenges are like when you're scaling a creative function. Do you want to sort of tell us more there?
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, most of our successes have really come down to processes, governance, standards. It might sound dull to some, but unless you had the foundation there, everything you do or try and grow is just going to fall apart. And I touched on this earlier when I joined Mace. It was just me managing sort of more of a creative function within video content creation and photography. As I said, we're a team of 4 now, and to get to that point, we've had to do a lot of work in line with, I guess, what you would do if you were setting up a production company or an independent company. Really, we sell services. We don't physically sell them, but we offer services, sell services back to the business. And if we can't deliver what we say we can deliver because our processes and governance aren't in place or watertight, then it all falls apart. And for me, that's been a journey that I've gone on. My background prior to this wasn't really in that level of kind of in that space really to kind of think about it at that level. And I've gone on that journey to understand the importance of that. Again, I alluded to this earlier. It sounds so obvious, but time and time again, those processes come into play, and then you suddenly just realize that actually you're going down a route that goes against the way you work, and things do always go wrong. So, for us, we kind of live by those processes. We try and stick to them as much as we can. Again, sticking to brand standards, super important. Appreciate maybe some businesses, smaller businesses might not have them as well established, but they're critical to have them in place. If you don't have your brand standards in place, everything falls apart around the side as well, So I think it's all about really, good structure, good foundation, good governance, good processes, and good standards to kind of build that team essentially around it.
Close that one out perfectly. Thanks, Nick. And then Emma, like you've grown the team drastically, but also seen a lot of burnout, resource limitations. Like, how have you handled that?
Yeah, I think this is probably one, if not the hottest topic, and what we all do is burnout. And what I want to address head on is everything we're talking about is great, and the growth that we've had at RO is great. There's also a reality piece to that, and I fully acknowledge that. Being a part of business planning, strategic planning, employee engagement, all of that's great when I know a lot of our leaders, and rightfully so, our bread and butter is winning work. And we all operate a little bit differently, but, in the pursuit world, and that won't change. But that's where I think it goes back for us, and I can just speak to our journey is being able to showcase that. And it goes back to the education piece. It's a little repetitive, but I think that's super important because it starts to tell a story. And I mentioned the visual that Derek showed earlier, but if you show all those pieces on that chart of what we touch and how much impact we can have, I think that's where the conversation starts to evolve of, life outside of pursuits and the value that can bring. But I would definitely attribute, the burnout is a real thing, and how we were able to hire more and staff. And some of it was just moving people to different seats, and building out a comms team and investing in a creative team. So all of that was great. And leveraging kind of the data and the research that we've mentioned. And I'm happy to share more after the call too of what worked for us. You can't argue with data. It's a lot of what we hit on, and that luckily allowed us to grow our team accordingly. Now, I will say what we're kind of, hitting, we're still coming across this. Burnout is still there, even with a team. You grow, you get more people, so you can do more, right? And that's just a constant. So I think that's a challenge that we'll always face. I'm sure every industry is similar to that. Where it's great to advocate for marketing's value and what we bring to the table, but there's a realistic piece that also needs to be taken into consideration of what can we handle, what do we want to say yes to while not burning out the team of 14, right? So there's a fine line, and I just think that's an important thing to keep in mind as we all go to leadership and advocate for what we do and all these different things that we want to touch. You need to be a little practical with that too. So I think that's where prioritization comes into play, and being able to connect what you think is important to what the company thinks is important.
Yeah, that's key. But we all spoke about challenges. I think it's key that solutions revolve around data, around structure, around leadership support. That to me is a big takeaway from this one. So let's move on to the next question. This is a big one. So AI is transforming almost every industry, obviously including AEC and marketing. And I feel like it's only been scratching the surface. Even though, for myself, I use AI every day. It automates repetitive tasks, provides data-driven insights, frees you up for creative, high-value work that truly sets your firm apart, lets you focus on different things that are sort of your firm's competitive advantage. Tanya, how can AEC marketers leverage AI tools to boost both efficiency and strategic impact?
That's a hot topic right now, isn't it, Derek? It has been for the past year. And I think over that year, the answer to that is only growing as tools become more sophisticated. Advancements in AI really present significant opportunities for marketers in particular. And we need to embrace AI. You need to embrace it to stay competitive. That's the reality of the world today, and across our industry. Historically, AEC has been really slow to adopt, to change, or to be innovative when it comes to the business space, maybe not the work that we do, but the business space, such as marketing. And that's not the case today. Like, firms today are harnessing the power of AI, and they can see all of the benefits that it can bring. It can help with data-driven decision making. A lot of what we've been talking about here today, using algorithms, AI can analyze vast data sets and uncover insights into everything from client behavior to, automating some of that no-go process for us, right? It can show us what marketing trends are. It can help us to best align what we're doing with the current market. A big piece of what we've talked about in AEC is proposals. Proposals are a big engine for how marketing is at AEC firms, and AI-powered tools automate a lot of the time-consuming and monotonous parts of that, right? There are programs that can scan to pull RFPs that may be of interest, provide a summary, provide a recommendation on a go, no go, provide a recommendation on a price, can write a first draft of a proposal in your tone, in your voice, using previous proposal responses. AI can get us to 80% done on proposals today. And that is an incredibly powerful tool to allow us to have the time to do what we do best and where the best value is, right? In putting in that strategic input, right? The differentiation. So my advice to everyone on this call is to learn more about AI capabilities and its strengths, and how those strengths can improve on your firm's weaknesses. Look at what tools you already have, because so many of them have already started to incorporate AI. So maximize that, so that you're getting that full potential.
Definitely. That's such a great point. So many great points. Adria, I know you've been using AI for things like boilerplate text, for brand consistency. How's that been working?
What did we do before we used all of this enhanced assistance, right? We have been using, AI has been around for about 50 years now. And most people don't realize that. They think they hear it, and it's all this new. It's been here. It's been used. It's been behind the scenes and in front. So now what we got to look at is, what are we going to do with what we have that's in place, and how are we going to utilize the best use of it for the future? And that's one of the things that we have done, is look at the tools and start small. Start with something that you know, and then take that information and build on it until you get to bigger projects. One of the areas you mentioned was like boilerplate items. That is something that you are pulling and all the time. And so that is a great assistance that we can use it for. We have our content library that we can pull from, and we can keep that up to date. And we have our team members now that are managing those items, and so that it's not the individual doing it anymore. We all have that trust in that process. And so that's a great example of using that. The other one is just like with OpenAsset now. I know that most people are probably seeing the AI features there. The imagery, that has been fantastic. So now that we're not going out and trying to find all the different images that I may want to pull for this, I can just go out there and pull that information and say, give me examples of all the flags that we have on site, on our job sites, and get those examples and those images, that quick. So it's a time saver, and that's very, very useful. But it's not just about content creation. It's really about that assistance. And so for us internally here, we've taken our IT department, we've started with kind of what that security measures, those protocols, what our processes are and how we're going to use AI and what that looks like, and then how we're going to in-house it and manage that content. And then again, having that trust in what we're doing with that information, and keeping that security again, so that it's not the difference between what's public and what's private and what's personally used. So I would just again say, just start small, measure your success, and then expand on it. That's the best way to build on AI. And the first thing I did with my ChatGPT was start, what's a good intermediate softball practice plan for 14-year-olds? for a good hour practice, and it was bang on. I went through it and I was like, check, yep, they've marked the box there. So go with something and then just build on it from there, and that way you can build that trust too.
Yeah, that's great. And I love how you sort of got into it just to sort of test it out. And you're like, I'm an expert in this, obviously. Let me see, what I can get out of this. Is it something good? Is it something valuable? Is it something I would trust? And I think also by using things where you're an expert, whether it be marketing or coaching a team and stuff like that, really just leverage that for you to really optimize your prompts and different things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Emma, how do you see AI fitting into a forward-thinking company culture?
Yeah, all of my responses today are from ChatGPT. It is a powerful tool. Someone asked in the chat, like, what are the specific tools? And I'll say for us, it might be surprising that we're not as far along as maybe some others, but it's intentional. ChatGPT is a huge, resource for our team, and it's something I'm sure everyone on the call is using it for, but meetings and really just some admin type tasks, and it allows you to focus on what really matters. But culturally, RO, we pride ourselves on being kind of forward thinking and industry leading technology, and we definitely are. But what I like that we're doing with our approach is, we're not proceeding with caution, but proceeding with a plan. And Adria kind of hit on that is, there's a massive partnership in this with IT or OpEx, or depends on how your company is staffed. But there's a right way to go about this, so we're not all using a million different platforms and different processes that come out of using different AI tools. So I'm excited for what's to come for us, but we're just getting our toes wet and excited to use 2025 as a year to possibly demo some pursuit specific platforms that will obviously help our team, but the hope is to not replace. Right. I think that's the big conversation that we have of AI allows us to do more with less, but how do we approach that with the team size we have, and then the industry changing, right, and the comms and the creative side of things. So a really exciting time. I just think there's a lot out there, and I think we need to be thoughtful with our approach.
I love that. And yeah, looking into 2025, I just want to say I'm really thrilled to share that OpenAsset has, been listening closely, especially about different RFP challenges, pain points, productivity struggles. So we're actually in the process of exploring different ways to leverage AI to streamline your RFP day-to-day tasks so you can focus more on strategic work. Obviously, we already have a lot of different AI features, but this is sort of even going even further to help out our customers. I'll leave it at that for now, but if you ever wanted a more efficient way to tackle proposals and win business, just be sure to stay tuned. We have some exciting announcements coming up over time. Let's move on to the final question. So we've covered a lot of ground. Let's close out with a very practical takeaway for marketers and leaders who want that seat at the table. Nick, if you could give just one piece of advice, what would it be?
I touched on this earlier. It's about building trust. I think if no one trusts you, they're not going to be at that table, right? I think to summarize on that, then again, it's delivering on your promise. It's not having extremes in your approach to doing things, and being considered in your approach. I think there's a tendency, maybe some people can relate to this on the call, where key stakeholders will blow hot and cold on what they want or not want, and that can change on a regular basis. It's about guiding them carefully in a considered way, and delivering on the things you say going to deliver on. That builds trust, and you'll continue to have that seat at the table and help influence those decisions going forward.
Thank you, Nick. Couldn't agree more. It's all about trust. Adria, from a data process standpoint, what's your advice?
To absolutely be on the same page and have the same game plan. And we're very fortunate at Robins Morton. We have had wonderful support from our leadership, and with our marketing and communications team, they definitely value everything that our leadership is bringing alongside and being a part of that table. Define your processes, unify your data, collaborate with your peers. And most importantly, that continuous improvement is one of the pillars that we focus on here, and improve with that continuous improvement. I mean, there's no stamp it's done. It's always looking at what worked well, what didn't, what's our game plan here, where are we headed, what are our goals, and then continually to build on that. Again, going back to what Nick said, again, the trust is key. So making sure that your data is consistent and accurate, and that you can, rely on that, is always going to be upfront. But there's definitely a payoff when everyone is on the same page.
Yeah, I love that idea of payoff when everyone's on the same page. Couldn't agree more. Emma, how can leaders empower marketers and drive real impact? What are your what's the advice that you'd like to give to AEC marketers and leaders?
I think that the biggest thing is that relationship building piece. My sister's in the industry. She's new to it, and she just recently was like, "How did you get to where you are today?" And I am very open about that. I would not be where I am today, and I still have a ways to go, but without the relationships I've built and the advocates I've built, and just the doors that, those relationships, they open for all of us as marketers, because they start to understand and see the value we bring. How do you get a seat at the table? Invite yourself. There's a good way to do it. Don't, you gotta be a little strategic there, but there's little things, like offer to help put an agenda together, so you can see what the agenda is, and offer some value, and maybe some, tweaks in a very strategic way. But I think, if leaders are not currently inviting marketing to some of these strategic initiatives in these meetings, it's their loss. They're missing out. They're missing on that piece and that help. So I think if you're a leader and you're not including marketing and BD in some of these conversations, I think there's an opportunity there. If you're, a coordinator or manager and trying to kind of break into that, ask to be invited or find ways to invite yourself. I think is a really big takeaway. It's helped me personally. And then lastly, I saw this quote recently too, and if for anyone that knows me, it totally fits, but take big swings, build great teams, and have fun along the way. That is, I think, so massive in everything we're talking about. If you're unhappy and you're not enjoying it, that's going to show, and you're not going to have the passion. Passion is a huge part of what we do.
Yeah, passion drives everything. So does happiness. So that's great. Thank you for that, Emma. Tanya, final thoughts from the leadership lens.
I would say consider everything that you heard today. That's ultimately what this conversation was about. The panel has provided a lot of really great insights and great advice throughout this last hour and 15 minutes. For marketers, my biggest advice to you is to continuously learn, to be proactive, to be prepared, continuously seek to improve. And as Emma mentioned at the very beginning, know your worth and articulate it and demonstrate it. And if your efforts, if they aren't valued, find a place where they will be and where you'll be supported and able to grow. And for leaders, invest in your marketing team's professional development and their exposure so that they can build the relationships that Emma was talking about. Give them those opportunities and allow them to learn and to grow. There's a lot of irony in the fact that people seem to approach marketing that it's something that anyone can do, but to actually find someone that is truly good at it is incredibly hard. So if you have a strong, capable marketing professional who enjoys working with your firm, who loves the industry and has that passion that Emma was speaking about, make sure that they're part of the conversation and that they're supportive, and your firm will benefit.
What a great way to close out this question. Panelists, I cannot thank you enough. I really enjoyed this. I think this was great. The last hour and 17 minutes was incredible. Nothing but just no filler, just all really great actionable insights. I learned a ton. I'm sure everyone who joined learned a ton. With that, we'd love to hear from the attendees. So drop any questions you have in the Q&A panel. Let's keep this conversation going. We have a little less than 15 minutes left. So what I will do at this point is just go through the different questions that have been asked, and someone, please volunteer to respond to this question. We have this first one. Our corporate leadership, from anonymous attendee, our corporate leadership empowers and supports our marketing team, but many technical leaders don't respect the processes and guidelines the marketing team has established around the proposal workflow. How can marketing teams enforce accountability across a large firm? Who wants to take that?
I'll take it. Fire them. No, I'm kidding. To me, this is we don't have that authority, and I know that, and you shouldn't. But to me, this is a reason why I love what we do. Is this opportunity to educate, the people. For us, it's the superintendents on the job sites, the project managers, and we need them to do our job well. And I think I think it's changing, and I think this is a positive thing, but I think overall, they view what we do as, we post to social media, right? Or we just put pictures together in a proposal. And I think any opportunity that you get to kind of break that perception is an opportunity. And I know the struggle is real, but I think an interesting approach that has worked for me personally is spending time one-on-one with our haters, I like to say, because what you do is you build that relationship, but you get to know them on a different level. And I think they start to see the value you bring, and they see you more as a person than a role too. And that might be hard to do in a larger pursuit setting, and you're waiting on them for the technical write-up and all of that. But I can't stress that enough, I guess, is that relationship building piece, and take different approaches to it. If it needs to be a one-on-one, or invite them to lunch, go to the job site and say, can I sit with you to learn about, something on their project? Because they love to talk about that. And you take that opportunity to also indirectly showcase the value you bring and what you really need from them. So that might be, it sounds easy to do. It's not, and it takes time. But when you see that superintendent change, you see it in their eyes almost, of they realize the value we bring, they start telling their teams that. So I think, build a list. Who are the top three? I like the top three haters, right? And focus on them and build that relationship throughout the year. And they become your champions. And that has been really fun. It's fun. It's frustrating, but it's fun. And the value and the payoff is really real. So I hope that makes sense. And it's not easy to do, but it's worth the time.
Yeah, I would piggyback on that and say too, speak their language. So in the AEC industry, most of the folks that we work with in operations are very used to project management. So treat your proposals like a project, and have a kickoff meeting and have this project schedule. You're the project manager, and let people know in advance, this is what I need from you by when, and here's the consequence. Because a lot of times I think with folks, they don't appreciate that it's not just, the scope that I need from you. It's not just the fee that I need from you. I need a lot of things from a lot of people. And if everything's going to come at the last minute, why are we even submitting? The risk of that is it's too high, right? So if you care about this job and you want us to put our best foot forward, then this is how we have to do it, right? We need time to do a red team review. And even prior to that, I'd start with your most senior leader that you have access to and that has influence on those people, educating them on that importance and getting their buy-in and their support. I love that Emma said, before, that someone said, if people hadn't read it, cancel the meeting. As dramatic as that sounds, that's the level of commitment that you should have when you're responding to a proposal.
Yeah, I'll just be quick, but it's something that came to my mind in our team recently is, if you have challenges with technical staff on getting the write-ups and getting the cooperation, an interesting approach that we might try is find someone on the technical side that does it well, and they see the value, and they're that partner. Have them co-facilitate a training with you. I think that could be really interesting, and that speaking that language, it's someone in their role and they do something better than them, and it kind of, it's a little bit of a competition, but I think that's a powerful approach to take that I think we're going to test out.
That's great. Love it. Another question. This one's from Anna. This is a question for Nick. Nick, what are some of the MarTech tools that you would recommend I'm assuming that this is related to those user journey trackings and things like that.
Yeah, I had to check this. I thought this question might come up. Unfortunately, I can't actually tell you the specific products that we use, but we obviously implement a pretty strong CRM system, and that plugs into a lot of our marketing tools that we then use off the back of that. Email marketing tools is one of the main drivers, and a pretty good tool that we have plugged into our website, which also tracks cookies and IPs and all that stuff that we all pretend companies don't do, but they do. That's probably like the main piece. I'd say the only other thing to consider, and the trap that we fell into years ago, was it's tempting. I mean, there's literally thousands of MarTech tools out there, and some of them are very affordable. Some of them can be as cheap as, maybe $10 a month, and some can be extortionately expensive. There's a tendency to flood your team with MarTech tools that often can do the things that each of them can do, and you end up with too many systems. We figured that out a few years ago and really scaled back, and we really have now between, I think, 3 to 4 main tools that we use, from project management, CRM, CMS, and DAM system, OpenAsset, and that covers most of the bases. But we were very tactical in picking the ones that made sure that they could integrate with each other, but also work complete in isolation with each other as well.
That's great. Just because I have a marketing ops background, so this is kind of my bread and butter. I don't know if it's the same for AEC marketers. I know HubSpot has a lot of different offerings. I'm not a customer of HubSpot. At OpenAsset, we use Visible for multi-touch attribution. We use Demandbase for like reverse IP lookup and tracking and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of really great tools out there. We got another question from an anonymous attendee. This one is, I'd love to learn more about you and your team's involvement in business planning, whether it's developing plans, managing them, or contributing to the execution. What role do you typically play, and how do you approach the process? I'm curious about any strategies or best practices you found effective in driving successful outcomes. Let's give this a quick answer, just because we got 5 minutes left. We want to get to a couple others. Also, feel free to reach out to any of us afterward. We're more than happy to elaborate on any questions you have. Anyone want to take this?
Yeah, I can give just my experience in RO, and I chuckle a little because a company our size, and I think there's people can relate to this, but we really didn't have a structured regional business planning process up until last year. And that was something that our marketing team needed, right? We need the vision and the future of where we're headed as a company and regionally for us to build solid marketing plans that make sense. So again, not everyone probably has this luxury, but I say, why not, create it if you don't have it, be a part of that. So we approached it as, hey, let's help create a template from a visual graphic standpoint, and a dashboard that each regional president can build out for their regional plans, that then marketing and BD can create a plan too. So the short answer to that, very short, is we were a big part of creating that process and driving that accountability. And we host quarterly meetings to check in on our marketing plans, but they're directly tied to these business plans. So no reason, I think, why you can't go ahead and be a part of that team that puts those larger business plans together.
Yeah, I would say too, it is fundamental. If you're not part of the business planning, especially building out that marketing plan, if you don't know where the business is going and where it wants to go, how can you actually do effective marketing? That's asinine. It is typical in the AC space for sure.
Very.
So again, I think it's that education piece to your leadership, right? So that they understand, if you want this to be effective, I need to know what we're doing so we can help you get there.
Yeah, that's such a great point. We have another one. Let's try to maybe go for 2 more questions, and then the ones that we don't get to, we'll be sure to respond after the fact. We have one from Michelle. What are the most critical marketing data points we should be tracking? I'm sure that there's a lot of thoughts on this one across the panel. Or maybe not.
I think this is a great question, and one that we have not mastered. I think as an industry, I'm excited for more of these data points and ROIs and, all of that, like we still need to develop a lot. And there's not enough research, especially one of the questions I think is, how do we create a budget compared to revenue? And I think there's so many variables where construction firms, engineering firms, architecture firms, we all do things differently, and that creates challenges. But that's something that we're kind of in the thick of for this year, I would say, is how do you measure and quantify the value that communications and creative bring? It's massive. We all know that, but how do you put that on paper? And I think that's a challenge we have as an industry. So I think, trying to do the research and figure out what resonates with what you're trying to achieve. But, the obvious ones are hit rates, shortlist rates, interviews in pursuit world, and even, CRM analytics. I think leveraging, data integrity is essential. How does that, what's important to the accounting team and the CFO of what they're tracking? There's a lot of integration. So I feel like it's a really loaded way to answer that question. But for me is we have some good data points, but I think the industry has a ways to go.
Yeah.
And I would just add to that, Emma, just simple is to say, understanding what your leadership needs are and that continuous collaboration and that open doorway in those relationships, that will also help in that direction.
Yeah, and I would say, like, if I had to only have access to one certain part of data, I would want to know, I'd want to know in what markets am I profitable? Because as creative as I am as a marketer, I know that engineers and architects are possibly even more so. And they're very passionate about what they do. And they sometimes may miss that, yeah, we're winning a lot of, fire stations, but we're always breaking even or we're losing money on them, whereas we're incredibly profitable in offices. If I have that information as a marketer, I can help inform that for the business, to get back into that business planning, to be more strategic, to have a really immediate effect on the future of my firm.
Great responses. We have time. Let's do one more question, quick, and then we'll respond later on. This one's from Lila. How can you get more input from leadership and accounting? I want to sync data, but need to get more people on board for this to happen. This panel's great because, you've all done this. So what's the trick?
Start with the relationships, that put it out there on the table and build those relationships and start there, but also understanding your systems and the system needs and what those integration opportunities are. Start with that data mapping, see where things are available or being duplicated, and start small, but understanding the flow of where that data flow is between the different departments again, and then seeing what's able to be integrated. There's certain, like for us, our HR system's not integratable yet with our CRM, but accounting with a financial data connector was. So again, looking at your systems as a whole and building those relationships.
I would just quickly add, this applies to everything we talked about today, but ask your peers in the industry, get examples. I think there's so much power in that, and I think that can be eye-opening for maybe some leaders that are resistant or they don't fully understand. I'm happy to be a resource, share visuals of our dashboards, what's worked, what hasn't worked, we still have a lot of challenges. I hope that's apparent too. We haven't solved everything, but be able to use the AEC community and share some stories and lessons learned.
That's great. That's a great way to close out this panel. We've made it to 92 minutes. Thank you all for your thoughtful questions, and a huge thank you to our panelists for sharing their expertise. Emma, Tanya, Adria, Nick. Can't thank you enough. Nick, I know it's late from where you're dialing in from right now, so I appreciate it.
I'm hungry. Yeah.
Don't get a candy bar. So thank you once again, everyone. We hope you're all walking away inspired, equipped to truly empower the AEC marketer in your organization, and be sure to be on the lookout for an announcement from OpenAsset next week or two. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest.
Derek. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks all.